Cool.
All right, guys. Guess I'll go ahead and start now. Hi, welcome. I am super excited to be giving you guys this talk tonight. My name is Rachel Reese. I work at a company called Firefly Logic. They're really awesome. I love them. They're in Nashville. I actually work there doing both a fair amount of iOS with Xamarin and F Sharp. So I get to combine everything I do and actually share that with you guys today. I just recently started started helping to run the Nashville F Sharp user group, and I used to run the Vermont functional user group when I lived up in Vermont. I spoke about F Sharp with a bunch of times at both of those places. I love it. I will possibly and quite likely get very excited while I tell you guys about how amazing F Sharp is. Feel free to stop me and just be like, calm down, focus. It's so amazing, you guys. So one of the real problems I had with putting this talk together was that because we're combining both the F Sharp group and the mobile group, I'm going to have to speak to the basics of both of these things. And so there will probably be parts for everybody in this room that are way over your heads and way too easy and you're half bored. So bear with me, I'm going to try to cover everything, but also stop because the group is sort of all over the place, I expect. It's just what it is. So I'm going to start with a basic why you should even consider F Sharp, why F Sharp is really amazing, why I love F Sharp. Cover a few of the fundamentals so you know what the language sort of looks like, you're a little more comfortable with it. Then cover basic Xamarin and iOS basics so that you get what an app will look like and go through a couple examples. So why F Sharp? Because everybody is curious. And puppy dogs are adorable. And animated jokes are fun. So one good reason, F Sharp offers us an order of magnitude increase in productivity. I have a couple quotes here. They're all taken from the fsharp.org site. I'll have my slides posted, but I have the links to the sources for all this stuff. But literally an order of magnitude increase in productivity. Because of the conciseness of the code, because of the easy readability, all of these things, one developer was able to take over the work of an entire team of dedicated developers. Now granted, it was Java, but still an entire team. That's huge, right? This guy Simon, he's now written 3 business critical projects written in F Sharp, and he's still waiting for the first bug to come in. This was written maybe a year ago. I haven't seen an update. Last I heard, 3 or 4 months after this was that he had actually written this, that was still true. So it had been a good year or so since he had developed these applications, and no bugs, 0, not at all. And it was the first one of the C# projects that he wrote was actually a complete F Sharp project was a complete rewrite from a C# project, and it was one that had constant bugs. Everything was breaking. It was all over the place. Everyone complained about it. It desperately needed a rewrite, and when it got it, nothing, no bugs. He has a great story about he contacted the teams that were using this software that he wrote and said, how's it going? Have you guys implemented this yet? What's happening here? They're like, yeah, it's been fine. There's nothing. We have no feedback for you because everything is perfect. And this one, I especially wanted to show you guys because it starts off with the UI work is especially gratifying. Now, F Sharp always gets a lot of flack for not having the UI support that C# does. And that is generally true. And it is fairly true, especially in Xamarin, but even in Visual Studio. But it still is really a good language to do UI work in. It does, it still works very well. It can be very, very gratifying. So I don't want you guys to come in here and think, well, writing iOS applications is really silly because there's lots of UI stuff. See, it's not, I promise. So to start off with fundamentals, this is a pipe. I have both forward pipes and backward pipes on here. They're both great. We both so if we look at this as a whole, one of the really amazing features of F Sharp is working with data manipulation. So we can take something like a list from 1 to 10, which is what the square brackets can mean, just a basic list. We can filter that, so everything that is divisible by 2, we can map that, take the, what's left is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, map that 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 list and add 3 to everything, and then sum those entirely and get one number. So it's a very short, very, very intense, very concise way of seeing all of that information. And that, being able to do things like this, really reduce your code down to the very fundamentals of what you need to do. There's not a lot of extraneous, parentheses or curly brackets or, creating classes and objects, and there's not all of this fluff code that's hanging around. One of the examples that I've used is, when you're all, maybe sitting at your desks in your cubicle and there's a light sort of flickering in the background, and you don't really notice it, it doesn't bother you too much, but you kind of notice it a little bit, and at some point it gets fixed, and it'll click back on, and everyone just sort of breathes this sigh of relief. You're like, oh, thank God, I didn't realize how much that was affecting me. That's been horrible. That's how F# developers feel. That horrible light flickering in the background is how you feel when you go back to C# after you've been with F# for a while. So, like I said, you can both forward pipe, basically take data and pipe it into a statement. You can also backwards pipe, the larger one in the middle. That basically just reverses the order of evaluation. So with this one here, I'm getting a new game board, and then I'm taking the result of that new game board and sending that into the start new game function. It's really, really super useful for basically getting rid of parentheses. I could have said start new game and then put parentheses around get new game board, but it makes you understand the flow a little bit better. You're actually starting over with get new game board and coming back to the start new game. Whereas here, or at the top one, you're starting with, this bit of information and then piping it through. And like this last one, as compared to this one or the top one, you can start by, figuring out a line. I could have written this final one here by taking names that vary, like this tuple of names and IDs here. I could have started with that and then piped names into array parallel partition, and then piped that into here and finally into array.list, or toList. Does that make sense to you guys? Piping is just a way of taking data and flowing it through to further methods to work with it. It is a very common thing in F#. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that F# is actually white space sensitive, which I personally really, really like. That's like everything. But I really like it because I've worked at jobs where we use things, I forget the name of the software, but that will actually format your code exactly. I've had, there's one very, very famous one, but I've had things where if this FSD is in 2 spaces and this one's out here a little bit and they're not exactly lined up, it will actually break the build when you check it in. Because it has to be exactly evaluated, the curly brackets have to be, on the following line exactly under where the thing starts, the method name starts. And I know a lot of people that find it's very, very, very important to them to write very stylized C# code. And this F# basically does all of that for you without all the extra tools, without all of the forcing you to add in 900 different ways of doing this. It just, it takes away, the extra parentheses and everything, just adds space to make it, I think, look prettier, look denser, look more readable, but you still have all of the features that a lot of people actually go out of their way to get in C#. So, more fundamentals, option types. So, what can C# do that F# cannot? Null reference exceptions. The major reason for this, and Greg, I actually wanted to get back to you, because the thing you had said, that would be an issue in F# as well, because if you're calling into Android and Android is actually throwing the thing. But I was literally in the middle of making this slide when you had posted about your null reference exception. It's like, this is perfect. So this tweet came out maybe a year or so ago. There's a great blog post that I linked to here on the slides. But it's basically because of option types, which I will talk about a little bit more there. They're like a much more powerful nullable type, is the easy way to explain them. But because of that, you can sort of make everything nullable. So here, you can use it on any type at all. Strings, you can use it on functions, you can encase anything in this option type. It doesn't have to be just an integer. You know, it's any type at all that F# has. When you pattern match on them, and like option types are a much more powerful nullable, pattern matching is a much more powerful switch case, and you'll all hate me for that, but sort of it is, and trust me on that one, it's much better. But it forces you, when you're matching on the cases that come back, you either have some of this integer or this string or an actual value, or you have none. And when you're looking at that, it forces you to actually consider the none case. So it's not just that you're checking for nulls and continuing on. If it isn't, actually, maybe you want to throw up an alert message that says something. Maybe you want to just crash the entire program because nothing can go on and this should never have happened. Like, but it actually makes you think about what your code should be doing there, which is better than not thinking about what your code should be doing there and hoping it doesn't come up later. You can actually, you can use option.map and option.iter, the methods that I was showing before when you pipe something in. You can map over both some and none and come up with methods to use those. I personally don't end up doing that very much, but you can. It's not something that you could ever have done with a nullable, is use that piping flow and mapping to work with it. They're also nestable. So this option of an int is valid, or option of a string. So there are times when that's actually really useful. There are, I think, a few other things, but these are the main things that really come off. And I'll show you guys a few option types later, but it's basically here you can use it on anything. The pattern matching is one of the really big ones for me. So now those are the fundamentals. So language features, type providers. Type providers are extremely powerful. Okay, just don't even have the words you guys. This one here, this is the SQLite type provider. So you can actually, from within your applications, you can connect to a SQLite database by just putting in, where the database, the source is, that it is a SQLite, the resolution path to where the SQLite DLLs are, which I think is a little bit awkward, but it's still being written. The individuals amount, which in SQLite, I personally didn't know because I hadn't worked with SQLite a whole lot before this, but it's the amount of data that's actually returned back. And then you can use option types. So if there are nullables, in this SQL data provider works for SQL Server, for SQLite, for I think they recently rewrote it to use access. Like it does a bunch of stuff. But you can actually, if anything is nullable, you can use option types when it comes back. So it will tell you if there is some string available or none in the types that come back. So basically, I've defined a type here that has a description and whether or not the task is complete. I get some data context, which, from the SQL provider. And then this is my query, basically. I call the context, I call into this tasks table, I filter them for things that are not complete, and then I map the sequence. So sequence.map, array.map, option.map are all ways of mapping bits of information into this task type up there on this line, and then I push that into an array. And I will show you guys this bit of code again in a moment, but if you have seen the iOS or Android Xamarin sample tasky, this is basically how I'm getting the incomplete tasks into my list on task view. Was just, these 23 lines of code. Any questions, you guys? Yes?
So, I'm sorry, but what's complete? You got complete?
This one right here, that comes from, that is actually, no, that's, tasks is one of the columns that is in that tasks table. So basically I have.
Just get that.
This complete actually from
This way?
it's from background.
It's actually not. It's, the description, it's task and complete are the tables that map to description and complete, which may not have been my best naming ever.
So the type provider actually pulls in the table and the columns as like actual type.
As typed data,
That's
yeah. The thing about type providers is it basically is a mechanism that will go out to any external data source, anyone at all that has been written. And and we'll evaluate that and bring back the typed information into your program.
With IntelliSense too, right?
Yes, with IntelliSense.
We're gonna see a demo of that later?
Yes, we will.
Yay.
So there are a few of them available. There are many, many, many more actually.
Mine's super.
But they're actually, yeah, you can just like dock into ridiculous. Yes.
I get the type providers go out and discover types, and the compiler then includes them, but there's a couple of XAML type providers that were written, and I don't quite get why we need to discover those types when those types are already in the base class library.
Go ahead if you have a better answer than I. Yes, please.
I think the intention there is that there's no code gen associated with that. So there's no, so like when you look at how XAML gets code gen in C#, you're getting a class that ultimately inherits from some BCL classes.
Right.
That code gen doesn't happen. The type provider is providing those types in lieu of you having a code gen step. So it's not that it's returning you the base classes, which are available in BCL. It's returning you what would have been the equivalent of the inheriting classes that would have been code gen.
And actually, speaking of no code gen, for example, the entity framework type provider, there is one that goes off and works over SQL Server or whatever else entity framework comes into that has all the entity framework goodness. But if you've ever worked with entity framework, it code gens massive amounts of information, massive. The type provider does not. It's the way I understand it is it code gens and then includes the necessary information into the DLL and then deletes everything that it did. So it's faster, it's scalable, it ends up being scalable to millions of types. There's a type provider, I think I have it listed on here, the free-based one, over next to SQLite, which goes out to the free-based website, which is just a source of data. This has tons of information, and it actually handles the entire website. So you can, step into anything. You can look at any bit of information that's out there. There's one for the World Bank. So all of the data that the World Bank has, you can just connect into that in like 3 lines of code. It's huge. You can take data from one source, or you can take data from the CSV file and pipe it over to something else like R. There's a great example that another guy named Matthias has done that takes information from the World Bank, processes it using F#, and then pipes it out to a bunch of graphs using R. And it's 20 lines of code or something really crazy. I can bring that up. But yes.
Type gen to regex.
To be fair, I have not played with that one. Go.
Basically, if you create a regex with named groups, it will project the named groups as type members of what comes back. So on your match, you can say, not just did it match, but give me, if you've got a name group for say, I don't know, TLD if you're parsing the URL, it'll give you a .tld member on your matched value.
And
What about the Python? What does that do?
that one actually takes bits of Python code, and you can import that and the results of it into, or you can call into Python functions. I've also not worked with that one, but I know that's how the language ones do work.
Like the
Yes.
Don't cite that one.
What?
Where's those signs of
There is actually a Don Sign type provider. It's great. I have the Choose Your Own Adventure one. I think I don't have the Don Sign one, you're right.
There's also a FizzBuzz.
Yes, there's.
Someone made a FizzBuzz.
Yeah. Some of them are toys, some of them are actually really, really useful. But the F Sharp community has a lot of fun building them as well. They make us happy. So because you can get and process this data from all sorts of different places, you can get data from both SQLite and the CSV and the World Bank and mash those all together, and then use methods in Python that you created 15 years ago when you were first learning Python to work with those, and then visualize it with something else. So you can go back and forth between all of these different things. And it's tremendously powerful. A lot of people have been making the case lately that F Sharp is very, very, very good for data manipulation, for data science, for machine learning, and it's because of things like this, because you can access all of this information so quickly and so just very much at your fingertips. Yeah. So this is one of the major things that no other language, actually, not just C#, but nobody else has type providers. Another one of my favorites is units of measure. If you're doing anything scientific, if you're writing game engines that have a lot of physics in them, you can actually put units on the values that you're passing around in your code. So this example here is some code that I wrote ages ago, but just takes, I declare some units of measure at the top, degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius, miles and kilometers, and hours, and then I calculate the US and the Canadian wind chill factors. The really interesting thing I learned about when I was creating this example, the US and the Canadian formulas that we use are very, very similar. Because of the different units, there's slightly different coefficients and constants, but it's basically exactly the same formula. But it only works at very low temperature when you don't take humidity into consideration. However, the Australians, just to be different and strange, have a formula that is ridiculously complicated that does take humidity into consideration. But you can also then use it you can calculate the wind chill at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something that's really strange you don't ever hear about wind chill unless it's the dead of winter. And that's why it's because of the humidity. So that was interesting to me. But basically you can, go through and say, well, this is the Canadian one, so only send me Celsius, and this number has to be in Celsius. And if you try to send in, numbers that you send in have to be specifically, have units put on them. So this is, 6 degrees Fahrenheit and 45.2 miles per hour. And it will cause an error, it will cause a compile time error. If you try to, send in the wrong, if I switch these two and I had -5 degrees Fahrenheit here, it would say, no, it would blow up and say that's the wrong unit. It's like, trying to mix integers and strings. Just those are two very, very different things, even if they're both just floats. The compiler knows that you can't mix and match. So I've heard several stories where somebody went in and implemented units of measure in their code and instantly found 3 different bugs because they hadn't been paying good enough attention to where things were supposed to be typed. And that's units of measure. They're amazing. You guys have questions? Yes.
Just you're on line 117. You're casting V to a float, but it sort of came in as a float. So I'm just curious: is that always necessary?
I'm casting it to get rid of the miles per hour.
Okay.
Here, which is actually a little bit of a cheat. I'm taking it to the power of 0.16, and you can't do that with units. And so I'm basically getting rid of it there and just casting it to just a float rather than, yeah. You first and then you.
Oh.
Nope, okay.
I noticed that there weren't any specific types for the division types. So is that something that's just like miles divided by hour? I noticed it's not explicitly declared. So.
It knows.
That's cool.
As you declare, because I take miles somewhere and I divide them by hours, and here's kilometers per hour, and I just needed to define the two, and if I have, you know, at any point, if I take a number that is miles and a number that is hours, the resulting number is miles per hour. Like it automatically calculates that unit.
Is this unique to F-sharp as well?
Yeah, this is an exclusive F Sharp thing. Look guys, this is the Y F Sharp section. Wahaha. So one more thing is just the concisity of the code. So if we look at, you know, here's declaring a few classes, a few properties. Here's basically the equivalent code, how you would handle this in F Sharp. 4 lines, and this even this continues. I gave up on typing it at that point. I was like, this, no, just no. And you can mix and match, as you'll be able to, but it's so much easier to understand and to read and to see quickly what exactly is going on, and that's one of the reasons that F Sharp people report having very few bugs. Yes.
I mean, isn't there arguments for specifying everything like C-sharp is, in terms of understanding how things are working?
Yes and no. I would personally prefer something like this because it's easier to grasp quickly. I can just glance and see exactly what's happening here. You know, there's an event, there's, you know, a price, a split, a dividend, and it's a lot, it feels cleaner, it feels faster.
There's another advantage
Yeah.
too, and that's that you get pattern matching with the F-sharp discriminated union. So like you get additional type safety, like you're not casting like you would be with abstract classes.
Yes.
The compiler can check it for completeness and make sure that all the cases are handled.
Does that make sense?
So are those classes declared later down in the code, or what is even like
No.
in C# there's a class for it. I don't know what F#.
Yes, they can be. It depends on exactly, but in this case, no. It's just a. You're staring at me like I'm missing.
No.
Okay. Yes.
Maybe I'm just being dumb, I'm not really getting how they're exactly the same, because on the left, we have an event which has 3 different pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now,
This one, the top one is the event, and then the price and the split and the dividend all inherit from that. So you'd have to have, you know, the 3 different, actually, you know, subclass or that, you know, then take a price and a price event and.
well, I guess what I'm saying is that here, these are inheriting from an event, but there, the price and the split, they're not inheriting from an event, they're part of the type, right?
They are though.
They are?
They are the same sort of subtypes.
They are, they're not sort of, they are
Okay,
exactly,
they are.
what you're saying, the representation on the left is a concise representation of what's on the right. If you were to look at the generated IL emitted from both compilers, you would see roughly the exact same IL bytecodes.
Roughly the exact.
Well,
Yes.
you do actually have one other feature on the left, which is you don't get any more cases. Somebody can instantiate or subclass your abstract class somewhere far away in the code,
And you
but
can't
for the
control over
F#,
it.
you not only do you get pattern matching, you know
Yes.
that you have all of the cases there.
And yes, that's exactly, when you pattern match over something like this, it will tell you that, you know, if you try to pattern match over just the price and the split, it'll be like, wait a second, you forgot dividends. There's other information here. Did you consider the case when this is dividends? Whereas over here, there could be other ones, you have no idea how many there are, where they are, who's created new ones and put them, you know, randomly somewhere else.
Yeah, it's super nice when you like want to change the event to add something new, because now you'll get these warnings all over the place in Visual
Yeah.
Studio. You just go there and add the right case, and then you're done. It makes it like so much faster and easier to maintain.
Yes.
And then also on the left side, you can have as many operations as you want. On the right side, you can. Right.
True.
Yes,
Very true.
yeah. So am I selling you guys? All right, so that is most of my spiel about F#. We'll move over to my one Y Xamarin slide. And the main thing here that I can't say enough is it's fully native. you're actually interacting with native Android and native iOS. You know, you get the, not the tooling, but the components. You're actually working when you build something and you compile it down to it's faster, it's actually integrated on the phone. PhotoGap, as we were talking about earlier, is all JavaScript and HTML5. It's slower, it's jumpier. When you try to scroll, it jumps and gets all awkward. Accelerator, which I personally hadn't heard of before this, but seems to be an option. It is a JavaScript API, but then it does have some native UI components. The big problem with this one is that you are required to manage the individual SDKs locally, which sounds awful, and the stories I read about it as I was researching it were just like hours of lost time when something went wrong. Like it was very, not sketchy, but temperamental. Very, very temperamental to make sure you have everything exactly in sync and it was all working perfectly. So Xamarin is just native. You write F#, you can write C#, but you write your F# and it's all it's exactly a native application. It's so beautiful. So iOS fundamentals. Here we have, and I'll show you the full Minesweeper code in a little bit. But the main class is your app delegate class, or type. But you have this finish launching method right here. You override it. You set your first view controller. You can set a navigation view controller surrounding that. It's if you guys have seen this before, it's very similar to what the C# one would look like. You can do basically the same things. You have to remember to register the app delegate. And main down here needs to be labeled as an entry point, and then call in to app delegate. The vast majority of this code is set up for you when you create an F# project. The only thing you really have to change is if you change the name of the view controller. Like sometimes I'll create an empty project instead of a single page application, and then I have to go in and actually add that bit of code. But basically, this should all be created for you when you file a new project in Xamarin. So it's just to walk you through what it actually does a little bit and what parts need to be there. But that's a basic, that one, and then your actual view controller. So here, again, you just need to register it up at the top. It's like you'll inherit from UI view controller, and then you can override, all of your lifecycle methods. So there's view did load, view will appear, view did appear, view has appeared, and
Appearing next Tuesday.
exactly, view will appear next Tuesday. So there's many of them, and that's just how you handle the lifecycle. And you can, for example, here let is how you declare something in F#. So I'm declaring a label to be a new UI label, and I'm setting the text here, and assignment is this backwards arrow, and then I'm adding the label to the view. And in fairness, when I ran this code after I took the screenshot of it, it didn't work because I forgot to add a frame and say where the label should be positioned on the screen. But you would also need to do that, and that's just a rectangle F that has 4 coordinates and tells you where you should be putting it. But that's basically it. It's just as concise. You just override the methods just like you would in C# if you guys have seen that. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
I know one of the controllers got totally labeled, so the register is putting it in the name. Is that in the previous page?
The previous page did also have a register for the app delegate as well. That my understanding is that will hook up the bits of the program. I don't fully understand it very well, but to make sure that it is looking for an app delegate when it creates a program, or when you compile the program and put it in, when you start to run it.
Call name you're asking for.
Yeah, exactly. And
Are you going to be using, when you actually make the app, you do bits in Interface Builder that I have to look up with?
uh,
Or
not in F# because F# does not have partial classes like C# does, and so having the zids spread all out doesn't really work.
So they don't even exist.
Right.
You're gonna make all that UI.
All of it, yeah.
Okay.
And I have not found that to be a problem. The C# programs that I've written, I found that I did the vast majority of my UI in the code anyway.
Right.
So it personally hasn't affected me. I do know that is, a lot of people have complained about it. I'm sure it's on somebody's list somewhere to handle. But yes.
Comment was made on the web that you need mono. You don't need mono to run this on.
You do need mono, but I think Xamarin will install mono for you.
No, you don't need Java to do that. So it was compiled to Mozilla.
Yeah, not,
Oh, you
not
don't.
once you talk about when the app is deployed.
Oh, no, when the app is deployed, you definitely do not.
Okay.
Development time you will.
Yeah, yes.
So Rachel, is register mandatory for Sharp classes?
Say that?
Register actually, is it mandatory for Sharp?
It is created for you when the project is created, and I've never taken it off.
So there is no this attribute on C# classes, right? For example, engineering.
I think there are.
No.
No?
Only when you need, to talk to the interface filter and stuff, usually.
Oh.
But I don't know if F# makes anything different there.
Then maybe it's not. I legitimately have never taken it off because that seemed very important and they were generating it for me.
Do you still need Xcode?
Yes,
Ah.
you do. You need Xcode. Yeah.
That makes sense.
But also, it's not Xamarin
You
they
have to
almost
link
came
against
out
the
with
headers
like
somehow, right?
redesigning
Yeah.
for iOS, yeah.
They have a new storyboard thing which is quite pretty. I haven't tried to use that with F#. I don't know that it would work yet. I haven't tried. It works beautifully with C#. Quite pretty.
Oh.
But never mind. Did not hear me say that. So the view controller, basically you overload everything. It's the way I would usually, so here. I just got such a kick out of that thing. It made me so happy. Where we started using Qbot at work, and you can just say, Qbot animate me something, and this one came up with meerkat. So animate me meerkat, Qbot. But this seems like a good demo thing because you're going to, I don't know, looking. How do I make this like 9 times bigger?
Special plus
Yeah.
plugin.
Yeah, it's command plus.
Shift plus. Is that good enough for you guys? So first of all, I have 2 programs here. Tasky, which is at this point only actually gets information from the database. I don't have it fully implemented. But Minesweeper, which is the much cooler one, so I will go through Tasky first, is I set up Tasky with, this is the SQL data provider, exactly that we looked at before. Literally exactly. There's an add task down here, which at this point just returns a new one because I figured that would be easier to work with my testing. And then I have an add task view controller, which you guys have just seen, is exactly. And I have the app delegate, which again, here I have a UI navigation controller and a new Tasky view controller in there, so I have navigation. And then the heart of the program is the Tasky view controller. Before I go through this, I will run this just to show you guys what it actually does. So this connects to a SQLite table and lists the data. I have an event in here to handle going to the new controller. But the main part here is this view did load. So I'm adding in here, in this line, that plus sign on the side. So navigation item, set right bar button, does that. Tasks, this is, I'm calling in to data and I'm getting the incomplete tasks. So this hooks into that data module and uses the type provider to grab all of that information from SQLite. And then here, I'm creating a table view that is as large as the table, setting the source to this task data source that I've created up here, and adding the table to the view. Yeah, it's,
You don't- you don't have
add
to
new
run
task, this is how you handle
That's good.
an event.
I like it.
So, new event handler, push a new view controller, the add task view controller. So I'm taking a new instance of that add task view controller and just setting that to be the current view controller, which is what does the changes the view over and adds the little back button to go to the previous one. The UI view controller handles all that. Here I'm registering and inheriting from UI view. And this is the task data source that we're using. So basically I'm inheriting from the UI table view source. You need a cell identifier, which is the task cell. You need to declare the rows in section and what happens when you call to get a new cell. So, rows in section is just the length of the tasks that I'm returning. And get cell here takes in, T is the specific task that is returned. The cell, I'm doing a little bit of pattern matching. So when I try to DQ a reusable cell, if that comes back null, then I create a brand new one, and otherwise I DQ that reusable cell. And so, I can set cell equal to the results of this match here, and then just set the task, the text of the label that is within this cell to the description, which was, get groceries or whatever else that I had on there. But it's, the data source takes in that list of tasks and sends back this cell when you calls into get cell. Yes?
What is that cell identifier, please?
That's used here when you try to get a cell. You can have table lists of different types of items, and then it'll try to only DQ like the exact specific kind of thing you need. Like maybe you're going to mix lists of strings with lists of integers. I don't know why, but and it'll get much more complicated. It's like some will have different backgrounds entirely, be totally different sizes. But you can have multiple different kinds of things.
Cells are just expensive to construct.
Yes.
That's the main thing.
Yeah. So
it
it's
tries to reuse them.
Yeah.
Cells are very expensive to construct, so it tries to reuse them.
yeah. So when you scroll up and down, it's much faster to reuse one that has just gone off the screen.
Virtualization.
Yeah. Thank you. So does this make sense to you guys? This is basically like, it just takes, like we saw, and it loads it up again, and this is how you would, get this list of items here. Each one, this get groceries, that is a cell. So you can make them obviously much more complicated. I've seen applications where it's, 30 different pieces of little information and, text here and images up here and, are you?
What's
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What's the type of string? The string literal in there, is that going to be like a system.string or an NS string? How's that?
Where do I have it?
He's talking about the cell
Anywhere.
identifier.
Oh, this here? That's a system.string.
So-
You can declare an NS string specifically, but if you just put quotes around something, that will default to a .NET type.
And then there's, I guess, automatic marginalizing, like
I've
pass.
seen it usually work. There's a few times where I've needed to specifically
Well, when
cast.
you're doing it implicitly, right? Because a cell identifier. or
Oh, it's
down
normally an
to the-
NS string.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, this will automatically. I've seen cases where I need to specifically cast it to an NS string before I can properly use it, but this was not one of those.
So the get incomplete task, is there synchronous or asynchronous?
I believe it's synchronous.
Is there asynchronous?
You can do some of this asynchronously, but I don't recall which bits. I have seen specifically, like, I don't recall, I'm sorry.
Sure, the internet knows.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely came across something asynchronous while I was working on these two examples. So Minesweeper is my much more fun example, and even smaller. I showed you guys this before. This is the basic standard.delegate. I will run Minesweeper actually first, and it is just the Minesweeper game. Yeah, so I can flag things here. Oh, that is. I refused, while I was testing it, and I refused to put where the mines were once I had gotten the game board set up correctly. And so I forced myself to just play it and play it and play it until I actually was able to test the winning condition. Oh, for science. So here I just have two basic classes, a utilities module, which I do some basic, width, height, number of mines, button size, which is, actually just run the game. So the size of each one of these little squares is what I call the button. And then the button padding. The action mode, which in this case is this selector thing down here, whether or not I'm flagging or digging. Minesweeper data, a type that just handles, basically most of the game board, or an individual button. So there's the surrounding mines for the button, whether or not that button is a mine, and then the I and J coordinates of where on the grid that button is placed. Cleared data, so these are buttons over here, and we don't really know what's happening with them. These over here are actually cleared. So it'll tell you what the surrounding number of mines are, because that's the only bit of information you need to know in this section. If there's 2, or 3, or 1, or 0. And basically it will print out the number of mines. If it's 0, it just doesn't print out anything. But I can't click on these anymore. You guys probably can't tell that I'm actually clicking, but I am trying to click. Whereas up here, if I click, something will happen. There's an event to handle all of that. So I have a few helper methods. Basically, when I'm trying to do all of this clearing, when I do, click one, oops, big. When I click one of the outside ones and it tries to clear away the edges, then I need to, figure out which ones are the neighbors, figure out like, if I click on this one in the bottom corner, then I can't try to clear things that are off the grid, because then the application will blow up and that would be messy. So I have a few, these helper functions here that just handle a lot of that for me. I have some randoms here. Setting mines and counting neighbors is one of the main functions of the application. Basically, when I create a brand new game board, I go through and for each button, I figure out if it should be a mine, and whether or not it is, how many mines surround it. So I'm just basically going through and figuring out which ones are mine. So if the number of mines that I set all the way up here, number of mines 10 for the entire game board. So if this variable count here is greater than or equal to the number of mines, then this one just isn't a mine, and that's that. Otherwise, I use some random, try to figure out whether or not it should be a mine, and I up the number of mines. Then I pass back, an array that determines, whether or not this mine has been set. So, for the width and height of this grid of buttons, determine a similar grid that says where those are mines. So once I know which ones are mines, I can go through and count all of the neighbors. So I get the neighbors from these helper functions up here, and then map those to, if that is a mine, then return 1, otherwise return 0, and sum the array of the surrounding squares. So like, if, there's one that would, like that one would be a neighborhood. So here we know that this one is mine. Or say we're looking at this one here, then we look at all of the surrounding, the 8 surrounding squares, say, is this one of mine, is this one of mine, is this one of mine, and then just sum those basically at the end. And then we have an array that goes through, initializes with the width and the height, again, of that same square, that calls this function add neighbors to determine what that looks like. And then for that method, I just return back the mines and the count neighbors. So when I'm calling to get a clear board, first, I set mines and count neighbors. So I return back this mines and neighbors. And then I create a button which creates this Minesweeper data with the mines, the neighbors, and the actual coordinates. So it just takes a look at the 2 arrays that I've sent back. And so it goes and looks up like, mines 0, 0, and says, whether or not that is a mine. Neighbors 0, 0 says, well, it has 4 neighbors, or 4 neighbors that are mines, and then I is 0 and j is 0. So for each place in the grid, it returns a full array of, or this will return data for, this one here. And then to create all of the board tiles, I basically do what I did before. I initialize a 2D array that is the width and the height of that with this create button function that grabs this data for all of them. This utils class actually took me a couple tries, but it technically is UI independent. So if I took this out and put it in its own class, I could create a separate Android project that called in for this. So it does have, the first time I did it, it was all built around UI buttons and whatnot, but it is not now. So it would basically, you'd be able to have all of the basic game data, and you just have to set up the UI over on top of it. Yes?
So what's the trick to that? Is there anything that we should notice?
The main point is to not, like here I'm just opening system, whereas here I have monotouch.
Okay.
So as long as you can get away with not using monotouch or I can use monodroid, then that'll be fine. You can call it from either one. And then the actual Minesweeper code, again, if we go down to the bottom. So this and get new game board, I had to make the Minesweeper button clicked, which is just the button click event that happens when I click here, and the get new game board co-recursive, which sounds scary, but I promise it is not. It's basically because I'm calling the Minesweeper button click event, or I'm actually not calling it, I'm just adding it to the buttons to make sure it's handled from this get new game board, and then from within the Minesweeper button click events, I have to call get new game board in some place.
Yeah, that started at the top.
Sorry, yes, thank you. From there. So because they call into each other, F-sharp didn't like that, and I had to make them co-recursive. Normally the way F-sharp works is you have to put, any code that you're calling has to be placed above where you are calling it from. And so that, in this case, I couldn't do that, but we are going to start here with this and. So getting the new game board, creating a new method called create buttons, creates a new Minesweeper button, which is a type of, actually, so maybe I will start from the top here.
Does it say code or how?
No, it's, I have let rec here, and then when I scroll down, because it's white space indented, here it starts with the and. So I'm letting as a way of declaring, is how you declare new things. So I'm declaring that one and the lower function at exactly the same time. So I have these two types in this file, which are the Minesweeper button and the cleared button, so that I can inherit from UI button, I can do everything that I would do with a normal iOS UI button here, but I've included this Minesweeper data and cleared data from the utils class, so that I have that information on whether or not it's a mine, whether or not what the surrounding mines are, is all in this, data part of this button. So the rest of this is basically just basic UI stuff, declaring what this frame is here. So for each one, stay over here. I take the data, the I value, and over here the J value, and the button size for both of them, because they're even. So that a rectangle left is the I coordinate, the J coordinate, and then the height and the width of the buttons. So I declare what the frame should be. When you touch up inside, so when you touch down on something, if you decide that you don't want to touch that button anymore, in most apps you can move your finger off of that button and step up and it'll be okay. That is the touch up outside event. To handle it normally when you just click, to handle like this when you click down only and come back up, that's touch up inside. So the one you want is touch up inside, so that if you just move your finger off of it, not explained that well. If you move your finger off of it, then it will not continue to call into that information, that function. So I set the background color to the light gray rather than the dark gray. I set the image specifically to be null. I set the title to be nothing in this case, and then I return that button that was just created. So here I'm getting a clear board, and I'm which is one of the utils, this get clear board. I'm calling into that to return back the board tiles information, and I'm taking that and I'm array2D mapping it. So I'm taking that entire 2D array of information that was returned, and I'm specifically creating buttons for the data that was returned. Does that make sense, everyone? So it basically just gets me a game board of actual buttons rather than just data. And so I go up here. The Minesweeper button clicked event. I handle the game over. If the game is over, then remove the entire view, remove this set of buttons that I had from the super view, dispose of it, and show the alert view that either says yeah you won or boo you lost, that case, and then start a brand new game calling that get new game board function. And then game over I will call from a few places down here, like game over, I send in the view, and I say you lose. Clearing a cell was one of the more complicated things to do. It was the thing I did actually totally last. Okay? I had everything else working. I was like, now I need to figure out how to click more than one cell at once. So I sent in the current UI view, which is basically what this dot view with a capital V is the actual screen that you're looking at. You can create new views over on top of that, which are information holders, often images, sometimes text, but there can be many of them. So sometimes they're nested, sometimes they're I'm sorry, monster.
So is it like an overlay?
Yes. It's kind of like a div. Maybe you can have like stuff inside of it. Could be like nested tables. It can get pretty ugly if you have like 30 of them all nested. I've seen some code like that. Supposed to be really thin ceilings. So yeah, so this sends in the current view that the button or the information is contained in. And so that way, once I have that, I can do things like removing the button from the super view. So when I clear the cell, first I get all the neighbors, but when I switch it, I want to switch out as part of the handled event, like this button that actually has a button click event on it and has much more information associated with it for this smaller button that I can't really do anything with. And so the way I do that is just by removing it and disposing it and creating a brand new cleared mine button with the exact same frame, basically in the exact same place I created a totally new type of button and replaced the old one. But I can do that by knowing where that old button was. So I get the neighbors and then I create this switch button function and then I call the switch button function. And then here, if the data, if that button is a mine, or is not a mine, and the surrounding mines are 0, then what I want to do is then I want to continue clearing other buttons from there, because that means it's like this button here. It's not a mine itself, and it has no surrounding mines. So in this case, we want to continue clearing all the buttons on the sides of it to get something that looks like this, rather than the way I had the, wow. So we want that to happen. We want all of it to be cleared off all at once, not just one at a time. So we find the current neighbor, and we figure out, is current neighbor, we do some filtering, and we return, in this case, is some. So the current neighbor does actually exist. And here we grab one of the, So here I've defined a function that goes off and looks at that entire grid of buttons and determines which ones are left to be the actual Minesweeper buttons and not this cleared mine button type. So which ones are left as the light gray clickable larger buttons and not already cleared. So once I know which ones of those are there, then I can filter by if it's a current neighbor of the one that I'm looking at. And if it is, then I iterate through the current neighbors to clear the cells, which is why this is actually a recursive function. Or clear cell is recursive. So does that make sense to you guys, the clearing cells? The actual event handler here, I start by matching over the action mode, which was whether or not I'm just flagging things as they could be mines or actually digging. So if I'm just flagging, then the only thing I want to do is toggle the image. Like nothing big, just if there is a flag there, make it not a flag. If there's not a flag, make it a flag. Simple. If it's digging and it is a mine, I lose. Very simple. But the more complicated comes when otherwise I'm just digging. So first I clear the cells, and I clear all of them that I need to. And then I go through and remove the buttons that I'm actually looking at. So I clear all of the neighbors. I clear this cell and all of the neighbors. And then I specifically switch this button to a new cleared mine button and add to the subview. And then I check to see if of the buttons that are left in the light gray, heavier Minesweeper button format, of those that are left, are they all actually still mines? Because then I've won. If, like in this case, clearly they are not. Because some of these down here, I still need to clear off. There are, this one is definitely a mine, this one is definitely a mine, that one's definitely a mine. This one, for example, is not. But at some point, I will either, it doesn't matter whether or not I flag them. Flagging is just for you to know whether or not, and not actually click on it again. But I need to check to see if all the non-lines are cleared, and if they are, then I can say that I've won. And that's when I call game over with the "you win" phrase. So, let's see, that's, we went over the Minesweeper buttons only, that'll check. The start new game basically takes an entire board, that 2D array of Minesweeper buttons with the full data, the actual buttons and all of the back-end data. I create a new UI view that takes up the entire space of the screen. I send the board the whole 2D array. I iterate over those and add each of the sub-buttons to that view that I just created. And then add that view to the sub-view of the screen. And then, because I've created the board on top, I need to bring the slider control up to the front, because without doing that, you can see the slider control, because there's not anything actually over it, but the view takes up, it is laid on top of this slider control here, and so you can't actually click on it. Actually, it took me kind of a while to figure that one out. Kept happening at random. Like sometimes it was clickable and sometimes it wasn't.
Always a little thing.
But yeah, exactly. It was like, well, I can see it. It's there. It's obviously, I'm checking to make sure like I've wired everything up correctly, and yeah. So the only thing left here is the slider control. I basically, create that up here, create a segmented control, insert a couple of the segments, whether it's a flag or it's an act. I specifically set the selected segment to the first one. I don't think I need to do that. I think it defaults to the first one. But because I re-add that every time it was easier to verify that. And then the action mode to digging.
Is the segment part of your?
Yes. Like the flag is one segment and the axe is one segment. So you can actually have multiple of these. I've seen when people will sometimes do ratings, you can have like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they look sort of like that. Yeah, that's all one segment control. I don't know if there's actually a limit, but they get smaller and they will only stay on one line.
So it's a variation on a radio button.
Yeah, you can't choose two of them. This is how there's no radio maybe. Totally different. Sure. And then the handle segment changed basically just talks about where it says whether or not you're flagging or digging. So that keeps track of which one of those is happening. Cool. And that is basically all of Minesweeper. Does that make sense to you guys? I know that was a lot of F# all at once. But that is basically it. I can actually, since I promised you guys, I can't verify these will all work. I've looked at some of them recently, but not all of them. But some of my type providers examples. PowerShell, I'm almost certain will not work. But
You're unheard of. If that worked on the Mac, I'd be very impressed.
no, but I mean, it's been long enough since I've opened this sample that
Yeah.
just in principle it's not going to work. But yeah, you can call it to PowerShell with any of the general.
Ooh, that's nice. Looking at PowerShell commands.
What's that $R witchcraft?
Yes, witchcraft. In FSX files, which are scripting files, which you will not probably use ever in iOS development, it's basically just a scripting file. That's the way that you open something or using statements.
Okay.
So in the view
like
controller, it's
Yeah.
you're adding references.
Got it.
Yeah. So the fun one, which should actually work, is grabbing the information, using the type provider, going out to the World Bank, grabbing that, and then, in fact, you know what? I'm going to cheat.
You should come on it in Windows.
Yeah, I'm totally going to cheat. Well, no, actually, I just set this one up for.
Dangerously.
It's extra impressive to do it.
It's right
Wow.
outside. Very good.
She changed her background color.
Oh, okay.
Now color I would change.
R.net got.
Yeah, it
R.net
didn't like R.net, Rachel.
Couldn't find the DLL.
Yeah, it didn't like your path to R.net. You might not
I might
have
not
installed.
have R installed. I think I do in Parallels. Because I opened this because I demoed it at the F Sharp user group.
With the R type provider?
Mm-hmm.
That's odd.
Yeah, see, I've had this recently open.
Sure.
What could possibly go wrong?
You should zoom it a bit.
Yeah.
Hang on a second. Not this one. Oh my God.
What bank data has code?
Hmm?
What bank data has the code?
Woohoo,
Sure,
sure.
if you just Google like zip code.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
So,
That's a plugin or this?
What?
So that's already going to the world.
Yeah, this is, I can add, you know,
It's not.
you turned on some sort of accessibility highlighter thing. That's what that blue rectangle is, I think.
Make it small, make it small. So that's what happens when you hit Command Enter instead of Alt Enter.
Good
It's
to
not
know.
like speaking, it looked pretty cool.
So this actually steps into, this is the World Bank, I can choose, you know, regions. All these, if I want to add a new country.
So any identifier of any weird characters once you use quote code?
Yep.
Yep.
Backtick.
That's just a general F Sharp feature without a type provider. They use the test often. They
Yeah.
test like sentences for me. But
So actually, I'm going to remove that because I know that some of them, I think I'm scanning for incomplete data in this sample, but that is one of the things you have to do with the World Bank data because not all of the information is there. So you have to properly filter out all of your stuff. So basically, I'm just grabbing, you know, country.indicators, electric power consumption. So here, actually, this is, look at this. You guys might not be able to see that because it's absurdly tiny, but, you know, agricultural raw materials exports, presented merchandise exports. And we're,
dollar signs.
yeah, arms exports, average grant element on new external debt commitments, bank Z-score, bank overhead costs to total assets. Like, there's been 100 or 2 of these and we're just starting Cs.
Oh, no. Now that's a
There's a
property.
huge amount of information.
And you'll notice there's no performance degradation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Waiting 100 years for the pop-up to show up or anything.
Yeah. So I grab a random assortment of, you know, electric power consumption, electricity production from renewable resources and from oil resources, and then the length of the country name, which was something I added in the middle of the last talk because they didn't believe I could. I was like, when did that one add? That's not part of the sample normally.
On the fly, go ahead.
Yeah. So I grab, here, let me get rid of blank. So I grab a list of all of the information for all of the countries in the list, for each of those 4 options. And then I put that, you know, into a list of, r.c creates a vector in R. If you guys know a little bit about R. So r.c will do that. So I create this data array of, all of the stuff that I just created. You can see down here, r.net symbolic expression. And then I created data frame, an R-style data frame. No. And I'm just hitting Alt-Enter to get it to run down here. So, that data frame now was created, and I use r.plot to bring that up. And that actually
Is the actual right data.
yeah, so this plots each one of these options against each one of the other options for all of those countries. But, I guess it's 50 whole lines of code. And that's accessing two totally different type providers.
Most of it just listing countries.
And yeah, exactly. 35 lines of that code was countries and setup.
The advantage here is if the World Bank adds some stuff, you just get it.
Mhm.
Right, so it's not like, that's why we got it in a library.
And if it takes away some stuff, at compile time.
Right.
So if there's, like with the SQL Server one, I've used that one a couple different times in production systems. If the DBAs change the database underneath you, or something happens to it, the next time you open up Visual Studio, stuff is broken and you know right away. Like,
You also couldn't, if this were just a library, you would have a sourcing issue of where is your data coming from? Like, does your library embed, 100 million, bits of resource information?
Oh, no, I assume that the library would still go out to the.
Okay.
Yeah.
This can generate, like, if they put new stuff in the database, and then it shows up later,
Yeah.
automatically.
Because the type provider's smart, there must be a lot of intelligence in type providers.
it's
Right.
completely awesome. Yes, sorry.
Question on Windows type provider. So the Windows type provider also breaks if something changes.
Yes,
Is there a way for that not to happen?
yes. Well, yes and no. There is a way here. You can cache it. So you'll cache the local schema, and you can say force update false so that it doesn't actually go. But the next time that you try to actually run it and actually connect to that type provider, or to the Whistle service, yeah, I think it will actually break, because it is different.
You kind of want it to break, though. That's kind of.
Well, yes and no. This will also break if you can't access the internet.
Well, that's what the offline thing is for.
Right.
The force update thing isn't really for hiding you from the service on the other side changing. It's so that you can work with it offline.
Yes, but it's still, like, you'll get the red squigglies and it'll be angry at you, and
Yeah.
yes.
It'll only break if something like changes, right? Like additions of extra data that you're not using.
If it's
wouldn't bother,
additions,
right?
it won't,
Yeah.
for the most part, it won't matter, depending really on what they are.
And actually, the WSDL provider, it kind of really depends on how the web service has been authored, because
Yeah.
if certain WSDL generation packages, when you add a field to a type, it generates a whole new type, which changes the type name.
Yeah.
Quit almost, or.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it really depends on what crazy backend mechanism you're using to make so powerful.
yeah. But in this one might run as well. I can try it.
And then it yells at you.
So in this one, I'm basically calling two different web services. One which I'm sending in a list of city-state pairs. One translates those into zip codes in like the central downtown part. I just grab any random first zip code. And the second one checks the weather for that zip code. So I send in that list of states. Here here's my zip lookup, and then this one here, like separates the, actually,
Yeah.
I separate out the city state. I find the correct state because there was one example, I don't remember which one of these, but like, I was trying to look for Knoxville, Tennessee, and it was handing back like Knoxville somewhere else. So I actually, stepped down through the XML to get the correct state, and then go call, so like zip lookup up here is the type provider that checks for that. I can then IntelliSense into it, get US SOAP. Get info by area code, get info by city, get info by state, by zip. So, it gives me a list of the methods I can call. It tells me what they take. So when this pops up here, you can't really see it, but it takes US area code, which is of a string.
That's giving you the whole zip file, right?
But yeah, exactly. You get all of that information right there on what you should be doing with this. and then I select the single node that gives me the text, the zip code. So this weather service here, I'm calling a totally different one. In this case, I'm just aliasing it right here, weather, because getting weather by zip is, it's just long. Temp in, I take a list of zip codes. I convert the cities. This method here that I'm declaring converts the cities to the zips by calling this check address into the check address module with the city name, and then I return a triple of the city and the zip and the temp. And basically, I list map the convert cities to lists and the zip list that I sent in.
And you render a bubble chart?
Yep. Because I'm awesome.
It's not a pie chart.
This one I think I remember taking a really, really, really long time to render.
If memory serves, I've used the weather service before, this particular one, and if memory serves, it's.
There it is, yeah.
The service itself is just their servers, so.
Yeah, so this side is zip codes, this side is places, and this is current temperatures at each one of those places. And then if you scroll over, like it'll say Panama City Beach, 3240786.
What's it using to do this chart?
F-sharp chart. F-sharp charting, it's a NuGet package that you can get.
It's actually just a thin wrapper over the standard .NET charting.
That's the standard wrapper for the .NET charting.
Well, it makes it F-sharp friendly.
But it's, yeah, I can just call, chart.bubble and pass in so that went a little longer than I planned on, but those are type providers, and you can see why they're amazing. And we come back here. That is it when it reloads. If you guys have any other questions, thank you very much. Oh, yes.
Is Xamarin going to run on the two new operating systems, which is Ubuntu Touch and Sailfish? Or are they going to try to put it on there?
I have no idea. I would think. Do you have any idea, Greg?
What was the question?
Are they going to try to put Xamarin on Ubuntu Touch and Sailfish? Which the Ubuntu Touch just came out. Sailfish will probably come out this summer.
Right, not that I have much insider knowledge there, but I haven't heard any talk of that.
Okay.
My guess is that if it got enough market share, then it'd be worth looking into, but I haven't heard of it being on anyone's radar, at least publicly.
Okay.
It's worth saying I don't speak for Xamarin.
Well, I would assume that Xamarin's gone on record several times as saying they're specifically targeting, Android and iOS, so it would depend on if those OSs are Android OSs, or if they're not. You know what I mean? If they're running the actual Android operating system, I would imagine that's.
Actually, the Sailfish runs Android apps and Ubuntu Touch, but it runs it right inside of Sailfish. I think Ubuntu Touch has something to do with Android. I don't know. I think Microsoft was going to run Android on top of Windows Phone, weren't they?
No.
Okay, no.
They
Okay.
that would not end well for a number of reasons.